Hello everyone, welcome to your lesson 2-4 on parallel and perpendicular lines. Our learning target for today, we're going to write equations of parallel lines and perpendicular lines. We will be able to write equations to represent lines that are parallel or perpendicular to a given line. We will graph lines to show an understanding of the relationship between the slopes of parallel and perpendicular lines. And your favorite, we will solve real-world problems that involve parallel and perpendicular lines. So let's get some vocab in our notes. We just threw out a parallel perpendicular about 20 times. So what are parallel lines and what are perpendicular lines? Parallel lines are lines that never intersect. They might look something like this. If I have two lines that will never intersect, that means they never cross. An important thing to know about parallel lines that we're going to use throughout this whole lesson is parallel lines have the same slope. All right, perpendicular lines are lines that intersect at right angles. A visual of that, if you have one line and the other line comes through and crosses it, and it's going to form a right angle. That little box, I think you guys have seen that before. That's an indicator for a right angle. Couple things about perpendicular lines. They have opposite reciprocal slopes. And also the product of perpendicular slopes. I'm going to use a geometry notation here. Do you see what the perpendicular lines look like? And now that I look at these actually don't look super perpendicular. But if you know there's a right angle, the symbol for perpendicular is upside down T. So you're going to see me use that throughout the lesson so that I don't have to write out the whole word perpendicular. So the product of perpendicular slopes is -1. What that means, if you have the slopes of two perpendicular lines, if you multiply those slopes together to find the product, you will get -1 if those lines are in fact perpendicular. All right, we used a couple words here, reciprocal, opposite reciprocal. Let's just make sure we remember what that is. A reciprocal is just a flipped fraction. Some examples, if I have 2 and I flip it, I get 1/2. If I have the fraction 5/6 and I flip that, I get 6/5. A -3/4, if we flip that, is going to be a -4/3. You guys know me, I always keep my negative on the top number. So when you flip your fraction and you're just finding your reciprocal, it's still negative, so the negative would go on the top. All right, and then, so that's the reciprocal part, but what is an opposite reciprocal? So that's a reciprocal, what we just talked about, so a flipped fraction, but I'm just going to write a reciprocal with a sign change. So it has the opposite sign. So if we look at our examples, if our slope is 2, let's talk about slopes. Let's pretend these are all slopes. The opposite reciprocal will be to flip it and change the sign, so it's going to be a -1/2. So 2 and -1/2 are perpendicular slopes. 2 times -1/2 is -1. If we have 5/6 as our slope, the opposite reciprocal, that's a positive slope, so we'll make it negative, and we flip it, 6/5. If we multiply those two slopes together, you'd get -30/30, which is -1. And then last, if our slope is -3/4, If we want the opposite reciprocal, we flip it and change the sign. It's going to come out positive, positive 4/3.